Round 8 SCG Syracuse. It is going to be two of our last few undefeated players. You see Jonathan Rossum on 4-color control, 7-0 thus far. Jonathan Dorr, 7-0, 4-color loan. Interesting take on the format for Jonathan Dorr. I have a feeling that's going to have a lot of similarities with these depths lists we've been seeing. Or maybe it's more classical build. I heard some stories about Punishing Fire decks maybe having a chance in this format. See if Jonathan Dorr is one of the players who picked up that technology.
Yeah, it's funny because if these decks start running around with a lot of these smaller creatures, Punishing Fire is just such an efficient way to go after them.
Yeah, Jonathan Dorr agrees. 3 copies of Punishing Fire in the deck. This is an old school looking Loam list. Dark Confidant, Scavenging Ooze, Tarmogoyf, Knight of the Reliquary, Chalice of the Void, Liliana of the Veil, Wrenn and 6, Abrupt Decay, Sylvan Library. This is going back a ways. This is like a pre-Modern Horizons deck with a few Modern Horizons pickups.
Yep.
See, we're going to start things here on a Mox Diamond. Grove of the Burn Willows also on the battlefield. Is that yet another Savannah, or is that the rare Scrubland finally being pitched?
That is the Scrubland.
That is a Scrubland.
Back when the artworks could just...
They could be anything.
Yeah,
who has some paint on there? Who cares?
Well, and they could look so similar.
Right.
Someone was like, hey, we need an artwork of a Scrubland. And then someone's like, okay, here you go. We also need artwork of a Savannah. They're like, all right, I'll take the exact same picture.
Right.
I'll put a blade of grass in there, and here you go.
Now we fixed it.
There's some interesting ones here in this 4-color loam list.
Chalice of the Void, not a card we have seen a whole bunch of today. Interesting, because I believe that card to be well positioned. Some of the decks, though, that have been sporting it recently, maybe not as strong as they previously were. But Aura might have found the answer to that.
Yeah, I'm just... There's one Tarmogoyf that I'm looking at. There's actually only 1 life from the loam. 3 Wrenn and 6. These are just some numbers that I'm a little surprised by.
Well, Wrenn and 6 is the new life from the loam. That replaces life from the loam. Gonna go ahead and cycle a Baron Moore here.
I just feel like I'd want 4 of one and kind of 2 of the other.
I understand. Key engine piece for this deck, to be sure. Or just gonna go ahead and deploy Marsh Flats. Ship the turn back to Rossum.
But I think between these two decks, the big point of friction is the Wrenn and 6. Both players want to get Wrenn and 6 onto the board and active each turn.
Right.
And just really leverage that advantage.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is that Rossum does have the Astrolabe mana base, meaning there are more basics in his deck. 4 basics for Rossum as opposed to only 1 for Or, only basic Forest, I believe. Oh, Swamp as well, so 2 basics for Or. But 4 versus 2 is a big difference. Rossum will be able to cast all of his spells regardless of how many Wastelands are around. Or could get squeezed a little bit.
Yeah, on the flip side, the Loam deck does show up with 4 Wastelands, and the 4-color control deck only has 2.
Good point. Good point. Well, here is that first Wrenn and 6 of the match. It's going to come from Jonathan Rossum. Let's see if Aura has anything to say about that. I think I know what he's going to say. Abrupt Decay. Get gone. No more Wrenn and 6. Had Punishing Fire.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought he might take the long way around where you Punishing Fire it multiple times.
I think that's risky. You really don't want that card sticking on the battlefield. Just answer it clean. Take the guaranteed out with Abrupt Decay.
Sure.
Here's a Punishing Fire at Rossum.
And this is the long way around.
Yes.
Yeah.
The longest way around. I used to play a lot of Jund in Legacy. There was a moment where I believed it to be very well positioned. And I've killed many, many opponents in this fashion. Slow Punishing Fires. Second copy of Grove of the Burn Willows. And we have a big 3-mana play. It's time for Knight of the Reliquary. A big boy, too. Brainstorm in response.
Yeah, Punishing Fire is not a fun card.
No. No, it's not. There's part of me that believes it's like probably acceptable for Modern in terms of power level, but I don't think it does any good to the format to let it loose.
Yeah, I think if people find the right shell for the card, it's just too oppressive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you just can't even play 1 and 2 cost creatures anymore.
Right. Right.
Which, I mean, who really wants to be doing that anyway?
Well, there's some of that argument to be had, right? Like, nobody does these things anyway. Why try and preserve them? But it's just not a net positive. The goal of the Modern ban list is not to see how tiny you can make it, how many cards you can possibly squeeze in there until the format breaks. It's about preserving the best play experience possible in my eyes. And I don't think Punishing Fire really does much to that effect.
Yeah, quite the opposite. Although some would have said that about Stoneforge Mystic.
We'll see how that argument plays out. Here's a Jace the Mind Sculptor from Rossum, having successfully answered that Knight of the Reliquary. And that's going to come down. Let's see what Rossum wants to do. Tick up. Makes sense in the face of Punishing Fire.
Yep, I like this line.
Going to go ahead. Bottom the top card of the library is Rossum. And the turn passes back to Orr.
And with multiple Punishing Fires, Orr really wants to be making land drops.
This will help.
Yeah, this would be big.
Life from the Loam, Wasteland. Looks like Marsh Flats, Barrenmoor.
It's actually big on a couple levels. He can keep making land drops, and he can
Draw cards.
Yeah, he can use the Wasteland to limit his opponent's resources.
Right.
He can draw extra cards with the Barrenmoor. That just opened up his whole deck.
I think so. Wasteland going to be the play. It's awkward to have to answer that Jace through damage, though, because it does grow rapidly.
Yes, but when the opponent's +2ing the Jace,
Not as impactful.
yeah, they're not accumulating resources in the same way.
Absolutely.
Wasteland the Wasteland. I think I like that. You protect your Grove of the Burn Willows this way.
I think that is an important part.
Yeah, very important card with the way that this game's shaking out so far.
We did get to brainstorming this turn. Going to go ahead and ponder, see if there's anything we want to keep on top.
I hope our fans at home have a snack and a drink with them. I hope they're settled in, you know, comfy couch, maybe a warm blanket, because this one's going to take a bit.
Think we're going to use a lot of the clock. Think there may not be a time-shifted match this round. We shall see. This could be a grindy one.
Man, the Astrolabe.
No more mana issues. Thing of the past.
Wasteland me?
Doesn't matter. Don't
Who cares? Who cares?
Don't care at all.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed with the blue-white deck in the previous round. Just all of the basics that it had in play every game.
A good spot to be in. Gonna go ahead, dredge Life from the Loam. I think Rossum appreciates this information it's picking up here.
Yeah, it's really nice to know about a card like Chalice of the Void before you have to sideboard for the second game.
For sure.
On the flip side, every time Orr dredges, it's potentially more Punishing Fires that he can buy back out of the graveyard.
Yeah. And this deck has some nice synergistic pieces. Like most engine decks, once it starts going, it can do some really impressive stuff. It looks like it's time for Orr to try and deal with this Jace for good. We are now, I believe, on Rossum's upkeep. Makes sense. You want to force Rossum to spend mana on his turn if he has to. With 5 mana available, there will be plenty of damage to send the way of Jace the Mind Sculptor. Here's a Punishing Fire. Jace goes to 1. Rebuy. Punishing Fire Part 2, the sequel. And it gets the job done. Jace hits the bin. Rossum takes a draw for the turn. Slams Jace on the table. No, not yet. It always feels bad when you work so hard to answer a permanent and they just have another copy. But it's just going to be Snapcaster Mage here. Brainstorm.
You know, that does feel bad, but I don't think Aura would panic if another Jace hit the board in this situation.
This deck can play long, absolutely.
Yeah, the way the game is developed, he is much more worried, you know, if a big threat hit the board. Jonathan doesn't have it in his deck, but something like Gurmag Angler, like that actually threatens things that will close out the game, because right now Aura likes the way that this game is playing out. I'm sure Rossum has just a ton of cards in his hand that are, quote, answers, but Or is not presenting any of the threats that they would answer.
Or, of course, former SCG Open champion. You got to go back a little bit, but it was Legacy again. Won a Legacy Open down in Baltimore in 2016. Knows his way around this format.
Won an Open, eh?
Mm-hmm. He also did pretty well at the last SCG Syracuse Open. Playing, wait for it, 4-coil alone. Finished 25th.
There you go. And, you know, I say things like a lot of these numbers look interesting to me, have me scratch my head a little bit, but if you're part of the scene, if this is what you do week in and week out, these numbers are here for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
You know who else won a Legacy Open?
Who?
Yours truly.
Well, they used to let anyone play these things, huh?
Yeah, it used to just be like, put everyone's name in a hat and they pull one out.
And you won. Congratulations.
Yeah, and I hit the bingo.
Stoneforge Mystic fan, if I recall correctly, Craig. Right?
Indeed.
Jeskai Stoneforge?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of true name nemesis.
Yeah, you played that deck at the right time, for sure. There's a Ponder from Rossum. Yeah, I think the longer this game stretches on, the more it benefits Or. And this is the thing about Punishing Fire decks. If you pick a spot where there's nothing your opponent can stick through Punishing Fire, like look at the creatures in this deck. 3 Snapcaster Mage, 2 Baleful Strix, 2 Plague Engineer. How does Rossum ultimately win this game? You're reliant on getting those creatures to stick over a long period of time, or ultimating a Renin 6 or Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Yep.
But you see, once there's enough mana in play, Punishing Fire prevents all of that from happening.
Yeah, game 1, the 4-color control deck just has no game against these graveyard strategies.
Right.
Light from the Loam and Punishing Fire just doesn't do anything against them.
I don't want to say anything stupid here, because I know I'll just be made to look like a fool.
It comes back to bite you.
But honestly, this game is like pretty close to over.
No, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of turns still to be played unless Rossum decides to just pack it up. But it seems like it should be deterministic from this point. Or can just play this super patient game, make his land drops, just Punishing Fire all the time.
Yeah.
And it should get the job done.
I think so. And that's when I love Punishing Fire strategies. I mentioned previously playing some Jund based around Punishing Fire. It was in a Delver era. Actually, it may have been the same era when you were winning Legacy Opens. But the thing was, every card in your deck died to Punishing Fire, with the exception of True Name. But Jund, obviously, plenty of answers to that you could set up.
Yep.
And so I was very comfortable just playing long games and eventually Punishing Fire out all of my opponent's threats. Actually went, I believe, 10, 2, and 3 at a Legacy GP.
10, 2, and 3.
10, 2, and 3.
That is a lot of draws.
3 draws against Death and Taxes. All 3. Couldn't lose, couldn't win.
Oh, what a mess.
That is a fine way to describe my Magic playing. What a mess. I agree.
Yeah, I often think like there should be a tournament policy that just really disincentivizes people from picking up a second or third draw.
Yeah.
Where like on your first draw you get a warning.
Second draw, you're out.
Second draw, you get a game lost the next round. Third draw, you get DQ'd.
Maybe that's right.
I mean, that's very harsh. I might have gone like way too far with that, but just something along the lines that, listen, once you pick up the first draw, you do everything you can not to have it happen again.
Yeah. No, I will not try and absolve myself of blame in that situation. I have talked at length about my issues with mechanical play of Magic cards.
Sure.
I don't shuffle efficiently. I don't handle cards efficiently. It's something I really need to clean up. And it's not a good thing to be able to pick up that many draws in a tournament.
One, also, it might be the type of decks that you enjoy playing.
Well, that too. Yeah, it factors into it. But in that scenario, I mean, it really hurt me. These were all games that my opponents, like I said, couldn't win, basically punishing fire locked, but I didn't close them in time. Otherwise, you're talking about a top 8 performance, you know?
Yep.
So we're just going to do a lot of game actions right now. I think very few of them matter, and I think Rossum finally agrees. Okay, there we go.
Rossum really helping us out here.
Yep.
Mercifully, he just got put in the sleeper hold and slowly choked out.
I think that's the correct decision on Jonathan's part. He needs to preserve his ability to win 2 games from that point.
Yeah, I mean, that game could have easily taken another 10, 15 minutes.
Absolutely.
If the players wanted it to. And they, especially on Rossum's side, he needs to win 2 games to pick up this match. So if you're definitely losing that one, just pack it up, move along.
No, I think you're right. And things are going to get better in post-board games. Why don't we talk about what's in the player's sideboard here? And we could start over on Rossum's side because I think he's got the biggest questions to answer. There you see in the sideboard 2 Veil of Summer, 2 Surgical Extraction, 2 Pyroblast, 2 Leovold, Emissary of Trust. Haven't seen that card in a while. 1 Vendilion Click, 1 Red Elemental Blast, 1 Plague Engineer, 1 Pithy Needle, 1 Caracas, 1 Hydroblast, and finally 1 Blue Elemental Blast. Do you have a plan if you're over on Rossum's side?
Yeah, so these Surgical Extractions are just the first easiest thing we saw. Just how difficult it was for him when the graveyard shenanigans were going on. And so that'll pick off Life from Loam. It'll pick off Punishing Fire. That card's going to be huge. I actually kind of like Leovold in this matchup.
Okay.
It's got a 3-butt, so it's going to live through a lot more of what's going on the other side. It doesn't die to Punishing Fire right away. And as the opponent tries to Wasteland you, Punishing Fire you, if they target you with Liliana, all of these things just turn into cantrips out of Leovold. And I think Jonathan has enough cards in his deck that aren't great in this matchup that he's going to want to switch it out for a better threat. And then there's a question of, does he want a card like Pithing Needle? You have to know that Ren and 6 is in the opponent's deck when you see the way the game played out.
Yep.
So I can see the Pithing Needle coming in as well.
I want to talk a little bit about these sideboard graveyard hate options for Rossum, because I think controlling Punishing Fire is going to be a big part of this game. Surgical Extraction is not going to get the job done unless or missteps.
It's difficult. Jonathan does have access to some wastelands, which can allow him to set up a situation where he's able to get it.
Yeah, and maybe you control the Grove of the Burn Willows instead. That's the way to go about mitigating the Punishing Fire engine. But as far as just the card Punishing Fire, Surgical Extraction, very hard to snag that one. In fact, even when Extirpate was around, because of the timing rules on Grove of the Burn Willows, you could often protect your Punishing Fire from Extirpate as well. If you don't know Extirpate, it's basically Surgical Extraction with Split Second, except it costs B. But that was a common interaction if you go way back to like old Extendeds and things like that. You saw that all the time. Good Punishing Fire players will protect their Punishing Fires at all costs. When we take a look at what Or has to do in these sideboarded games, there you see 3 copies Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, 3 Leyline of the Void, 2 Swords to Plowshares, 2 Plague Engineer, 1 Tireless Tracker, 1 Tarmogoyf, 1 Crop Rotation, 1 Bajuka Bog, and 1 Assassin's Trophy. What do you want to do if you're over on Or's side?
So I don't think Or's going to change a whole lot. His strategy in this game just seems so effective in game 1 that I don't think he makes a ton of changes going into game 2. I can see the Tireless Tracker coming in, this super grindy matchup where they each just play a ton of turns. I can see the Tarmogoyf coming in as just another threat, especially if you think, hey, after the way the first game played out, Rossum's going to take out so much of his creature removal to try to handle the other aspects of what my deck is doing. Potentially Goyf just comes down, it's big, it attacks Planeswalkers, it's a good card.
I'll have to see what Or wants to do. What I want to do is start playing Loam again. It's been a long time since I was able to play 4-color Loam. It's actually the first deck I ever played in Legacy. Well, wait, that might have been Belcher. The first real deck I ever played in Legacy was 4-color Loam. It was one of my favorites. I would need to pick up some cards, though, and I may as well check out that SCG weekly sale. It's going on right now. go.starcitygames.com/sale, where you can get such hits as Opalescence,
Brian,
Japanese Liliana of the Vest, Restore Balance, and Thawing Glaciers, all of your favorite cards.
Who makes these graphics for us?
I don't know, Craig. Why? Did you have a problem with these graphics?
For the fans at home, I mean, you need these Opalescence.
Right.
You've been waiting forever for them to go on sale.
Yes.
Here they are. They're on sale. Take advantage of it.
That is the missing gem in my collection right now. Just a nice playset of Opalescence. In all seriousness, I check out the SCG sale every week. I always am very excited by what I find there. I order the cards. I come pick them up when I come do these events. They're always waiting for me. A nice big stack of cards. Definitely appreciate the SCG sale. Go check that one out.
And you get a discount on singles if you're a premium member, right?
Oh, good advertising there, Craig. You are 100% correct. Looks like things have started, and Or brought in Leyline of the Void.
So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, we didn't talk much about that.
No, so the graveyard cards were ones that I wasn't sure he would want against Rossum, but he's saying, shutting off Snapcaster Mage, turning off Ren and 6, these are things that are important enough in this matchup that I'll play Leyline of the Void against them.
Yeah, I trust Or. I'm just going to say that. I trust Or has played this deck way more than I have. If this is what he believes to be important in this matchup, I think he's probably spot on.
Well, and Leyline of the Void is particularly difficult to get off of the board once it's there.
Yeah, very sticky. Abrupt Decay is usually the way Rossum would deal with these type of permanents, but Leyline of the Void, too big. 4 mana. Free spell. Free spells are good. Who knew? Here's Savannah. I know now how to tell Savannah.
What is going on with the Savannahs?
I know how to tell it apart from Scrubland. Scrubland, half of the art box has random paint on the bottom half. Savannah, it's about 3/4 has random paint.
It's the horizon, where the horizon falls in the artwork.
That is how you tell. That's the key to understanding which of the maligned dual lands is presently in play. Brainstorm for Rossum. Scalding Tarn follow-up. Going to go ahead and cycle Tranquil Thicket on Or's side. Thought we'd see more of these cycling lands, Life from the Loam, Ren and 6 setups in Modern. That was the first place my head went when I saw Ren and 6. Hasn't really come to fruition yet.
Yeah, so Modern is interesting. I think the decks are so streamlined and so committed to specific strategies.
Yep.
And when you look at Legacy, the existence of Force of Will and Wasteland just slows things down just enough that it carves out a place for a more mid-rangey deck like this.
I think you're right. And I also think that Modern is trending in that direction right now. It's nowhere near the level of Legacy, but it's trending in that direction. The addition of Stoneforge Mystic, Force of Negation certainly having an effect on the format.
Yeah, I agree that Modern has slowed down. I think a lot of that has to do with the losing the best spell.
Yeah.
So
I think you're right. Faithless Looting Ban, big impact there.
That just slowed down so many of the decks.
This was my concern with Tarmogoyf. I think this is like fine. I don't think you're super upset about this, but I was always hesitant to keep my Tarmogoyfs in against Baleful Strix. The trade is just so unfavorable. I really tried to avoid it in most scenarios, but here, where Or has access to recursive removal, I like the setup a little bit more.
Yeah, I think he can just play the waiting game where they each look at each other and eventually a Punishing Fire, maybe even a Liliana in the Veil comes down on the board and clears the way.
Right.
The Leyline of the Void, Tarmogoyf, Nambo is always a fun one.
Yep. A little awkward. It's okay. Eventually Or will pump up that Tarmogoyf all on his own, starts loaming a little bit. Here's a Plague Engineer. More Death Touch creatures.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised to see these Death Touch creatures still in the deck. They're just so vulnerable to punishing fire, and they don't really threaten the opponent at all.
Plague Engineer naming human. Thanks, Jonathan, for keeping track of that for us. Appreciate you. I'm also surprised to see these creatures, but at the same time, Rossum has to win the game. I mean, he just has to eventually stick some threats. Can't cut them all.
Sure, that's why I thought Leovold would come in. It's just a little bit faster of a clock, and then it has more utility drawing extra cards.
Also shuts off the Tranquil Thicket engine, which is nice.
The Baleful Strix, I can see how that card just almost never ever gets cut. It always cycles. It's evasive. It's a blue card to pitch the Force of Will.
Right.
You know, the opportunity cost of drawing that card is just so low. Plague Engineer, however,
bit of a misstep here for Jonathan Orr. I was checking myself for a second. I said, do I not know the creature type of Dark Confidant? I did know it, though. It's a human.
Yeah, Jonathan just not realizing. Just sends his poor human to the slaughter.
How you like those Plague Engineers now?
Yeah. Sorry, Bob.
Already paid for itself. So a bit of a misstep there from Jonathan. Taking it in stride, though. Going to go ahead and activate Knight of the Reliquary. Get a Wasteland. And that Wasteland is going to take care of a Badlands. Boy, this is just the game of misfit dual lands. Jonathan showing a real preference for controlling the graveyard. Scavenging Ooze now coming down. He saw this as a battleground and committed some resource towards it.
Yeah, the Ooze, it's in his main deck. There are enough things going on with the graveyard where it just seems like it has enough utility. You leave it in. It's not going to grow very often. But eating the lands, eating Snapcaster targets, stuff like that, still just all seems relevant.
Right. Let's not forget Rossum also has things like Call Against Command.
Yep.
It really is touching the graveyard a lot. Not in dramatic ways, but in subtle ways. Time for some fetching for Rossum.
Yeah, and he's kind of in an awkward spot. When your deck is 4 colors and you don't have an Astrolabe, you kind of want to get dual lands. But if you can't get the Knight of the Reliquary off the board, you don't want to just get beat up by recursive Wasteland out of the opponent's deck.
Right.
And we see him just struggling with the decision.
Well, I think Orr's deck naturally just places Rossum in the squeeze. Not a lot of good options for Rossum.
And yeah, it's possible that Orr's deck is just very well positioned with the way the metagame is moving towards these control decks, and then even the aggressive decks have slowed down to be a little bit more resilient against these control decks.
Right. Well, 7-0 thus far. Signs point to yes. Well, here is Jace the Mind Sculptor. That's going to go ahead and return Knight of the Reliquary to hand. And the turn heads back to Orr. See Orr with another Dark Confidant in hand. May not want to play that one.
Keep testing him.
Does he have it this time?
Yeah, feel him out, man. We're not scared.
Just tin cup it. Just keep running your Dark Confidant out there until it sticks. There's an Abrupt Decay on that Plague Engineer. That means we're free to make an attack at Jace. We're going to do a little trading, maybe.
Yep, Rossum's choice.
Time to get that Tarmogoyf off the battlefield. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's the slightly bigger one, and your graveyard's already shut off, so you don't care about the ooze as much.
But this opened the door for Orr to deploy Dark Confidant, and this time it remains on the battlefield.
It is a little awkward leaving the ooze where the opponent's got multiple creatures in their graveyard.
It can grow.
And it'll be bigger than that Goyf was going to be potentially next turn.
Colligan's Command, 2 damage, discard, Knight of the Reliquary, hits the bin. Yeah, let's see how hard Orr wants to invest into this ooze.
Yeah, and
nothing. 2 damage.
I'm a little surprised it's nothing.
Me too. Sylvan Library, though, nice little follow-up here.
Oh, it's a great draw. He's got lots of life to work with, so if he wants to pay the life, he can. It's going to just look at way more cards. Of course, Orr just has tons of the fetch lands in his deck, so he can turn the Sylvan Library into Brainstorm activations. A lot of good things happening with the Sylvan Library here.
Yeah, I like that one a lot here for Orr.
And looking at this, it just shows you how rough this matchup is for Rossum, where he seemingly has navigated the game in a way where he just has way more resources than the opponent. Right, he's dealt with the opponent's threats. He's still got tons of cards in his hand. He's got lots of lands to work with in play, and there's just not a clear path for him to get from this board state to winning the game.
It just feels like none of his cards matter.
Yeah.
Here's Abrupt Decay, answering that library. That's a good start. Now we are going to grow that ooze. I think we maybe should have done that previously, but that's okay. Wooded Foothills is the draw here.
Are we getting a 1-1? Do we have a 1-1? Doesn't seem like this deck would play a 1-1.
No, we don't. But we do have Basic Forest, basically as good as a 1-1. Now we're going to start growing that Scavenging Ooze more aggressively. Gaining a little life is Orr. And swinging in for 6 points of damage.
The clock is real.
Yeah. I still think we missed some damage last turn. We'll see if that matters. Rossum now casting Ponder. Is there any help in the top 3 cards of the library? Looks like yes. We're going to draw it. Mana is tapped, and it's time for Plague Engineer. That'll at least trade with that ooze. Chalice of the Void.
Oh.
Chalice on 1, shutting off a lot of meaningful cards from Rossum. Has plenty of outs to that, though. Abrupt Decay, Colligan's Command. Can find ways around it.
Yeah, but he's already played a number of those cards.
Yes. But has another one.
All right.
Command. Answers the Chalice. Discards Grove of the Burn Willows. This was on Orr's draw step, I believe.
Yep. Draw step, shatter, make you discard.
Looks good to me. Rossum going to fall to 8.
And I think the big payoff for Rossum here would be another Jace the Mind Sculptor. That's the card that would, accumulate enough card advantage, or he could just start potentially plussing it. If he has another removal spell or a counter spell in his hand to deal with the next thing out of Orr's deck, then the Jace would be, it always has been, the Mac Daddy that would come down and lock this game away.
For sure. Few cards better at just closing out a game than Jace the Mind Sculptor. Time for a Ponder. I might have saw it.
Yeah, it looked like a Jace.
There's the draw. Oh, look who it is. Jace the Mind Sculptor. And now we can get aggressive. Plague Engineer. Or just never able to find the pieces this game. Needed to put that engine together. Not there, though. There's an Astrolabe. Draw a card. Another Astrolabe. Draw a card.
Yeah, I like the brisk pace out of Rossum.
Yeah, it knows he's got to finish the 3rd game here. Time for another bounce. More beats from the Plague Engineer. And Leovold.
Okay.
Coming down. So those did make the cut. I like it quite a bit. No Punishing Fires, no Groves. No chance. Might be the story of this game. There's another Chalice on one. What's the follow-up?
Yeah, I think Rossum has a surgical extraction in his hand. And so he's thinking about using it right here.
We'll find out what that's targeting. Looks like it's going to take care of Grove of the Burn Willows. Makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, the Nightmare scenario is a Punishing Fire coming online.
There was a moment of pause where I was like, did Orr cut the Punishing Fires? No, they're there. They're just all in the top part of the deck.
Well, it's possible he trimmed a couple.
He's down to 3 copies now. It looks like that is as many as he had in the main deck.
Okay, he only has 3. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I don't think you can. It's just, this game plays out totally differently if you ever find that combo.
Yep.
It's just the key in this matchup. And that's why we're seeing Rossum able to pull ahead here. Probably going to force this one to a deciding game 3. Let's not count our chickens. Let's see how this plays out.
He's in a good spot right now.
Mm-hmm. Rossum sends the turn back. It's another Knight of the Reliquary. Should say the same Knight of the Reliquary we've been seeing all this time.
Multiple appearances out of that one.
Right. Not even any red mana for Orr. So can't rip Punishing Fire, Punishing Fire, Punishing Fire for the win. Too bad.
Yeah, there's actually a reasonable number of cards in this deck that he couldn't cast right now. If he still has Liliana in the deck, that one's tough. Any of the red cards.
Yeah, Rossum done a nice job picking off some key lands. Yeah, there's a Mox in hand. Can solve some of the woes if it picks up a partner. Looks like maybe another Chalice in hand. Not the time for that card. That has come and gone. There is Mox Diamond. It's going to resolve. Blast Zone to the bin. What can we do with any color of mana? Caracas, bounce, Leovold.
Going to thin the deck in response to the draw trigger.
Falls to 4. That 4 number scares me a little bit, I will say. Here's Punishing Fire on Plague Engineer. And that is going to do it. Jonathan Orr takes down this game. It looked like Rossum was wrestling control of that one, but all it took was 1 Punishing Fire.
Well, he had so many cards, Rossum. 2 turns in a row, he got to activate Jace, and then he had drawn an extra card off of the Leovold. He was cracking fetch lands to sculpt his draws, and it just shows like the amount of cards in the matchup that he has that just don't interact well with the opponent.
Yeah, I think it may have been a combination of a little bit of unkindness from the top of the deck and just a lot of ineffectual cards in the matchup. You got to feel for Rossum there. It looked like he had turned the corner for that game.
Yeah.
Or finds the win and in another dangerous position to take down a Legacy Open. Pretty good stuff from Orr.
Sure, I mean, game 1. It just looks so dominant, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Rossum just casting spells, and none of them seem to matter.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see if or is able to find more victims for that Punishing Fire setup. But for the time being, we can talk a little bit more Throne of Eldraine. You excited to do that?
I'm in.
Yeah, I am always down to talk new cards. As I often say, this is the best part of Magic. Getting the new cards, figuring out the possibilities, thinking about what you can do over the next few months. That's what gets my blood boiling. It gets me excited. It's why I love this game so much, because it changes all the time. And one of the changes I want to talk about, Wildborn Preserver. Have you seen this card yet, Craig?
I have.
Are you familiar with it?
I have.
And of course, if you want to get your hands on these cards, well, you could probably go and check out the Throne of Eldraine pre-order page. I believe it's go.starcitygames.com/ELD. There you go, Throne of Eldraine pre-order today. Get our names out of there. No one cares who we are.
No one cares.
They want to see these Magic cards. That's what they want. Go.starcitygames.com.
Buy our stuff.
/ELD. Purchase our products. Play with Magic cards. And one of the ones you're going to want to be playing with, Wildborn Preserver. This is 1 colorless, 1 green mana for a flash 2/2. When you play a non-human creature, you can pay X, and this card just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And these green flash-style threats, we keep seeing more and more of these. There was Nightpack Ambusher, which had its run early on in the format. The Simic Flash deck, really a contender in the early weeks of the last format. This is a new one, though. And I think that there's still legs for this archetype going forward. A little bit of technical difficulties there. We'll get it up on screen for you in just a moment. In the meantime, Craig, let's talk about what we want to do with this card.
So just flavor-wise, in this set, they've created this interesting cycle of cards that interact well with non-humans.
Right.
It's the humans versus the fairy tales.
Yeah.
And that thematically, to me, is just so fun. Where at first, when I read the very first one of these cards that came out, I was like,
what are we doing here?
Yeah, why non-human?
Right.
Like everything else but human. But as the set came out, they release more, and there's all of these cards that are like, hey, we want to interact with the other spirit creatures in this world, not the humans.
Right.
And it's just so fun to me that it's another thing that I'm looking forward to playing with, and I'll just get no end of enjoyment with some of these decks.
It's a very cool setup. I forgot about the reach on Wildborn Preserver, another important ability there. Because it's an elf archer, that's why it's given reach, going all the way back. Historically, archers have had reach.
Elvish archer.
Absolutely.
Wait, that didn't have reach.
Oh, it's first strike.
First strike.
Yeah. They didn't quite have that figured out yet. They didn't realize archers were taking down
bow and arrows, but they didn't figure out they could shoot up into the air.
They shot really fast instead.
Yeah, just straight.
Yeah, that's the way that worked. Wildborn Preserver, though, going back to that trope of archers being able to block flying creatures, I think that's an important part of the card. The one gripe I have with this card, I will never see this.
I know where this is going.
As an elf archer. This is some kind of wolf to me. I think of it like in conjunction. I mentioned Nightpack Ambusher. Well, this is a card that plays well in that same style of deck, and that's an ability that can boost wolves. And now I see this, and I'm going to have to get some stops in my head to make sure I know this card is not getting buffed in that fashion. But what I really like about this card, I love how it fills out your curve. Right? Aggro decks a lot of the time are about lining up properly, using your mana efficiently, making sure you're getting the most out of each individual card you play. Wildborn Preserver fills a lot of the gaps you may otherwise have. If you don't have your 3-drop after you've deployed Wildborn Preserver, but you have a 1-drop, well, you also have a new home for your other 2 mana.
Yes.
And I think that matters a lot. Efficient mana usage for aggro